everybody, and welcome to the finale of our series on Ruth, which is just as exciting as any other season finale, right? Like The Bachelor or Grey's Anatomy. Anyway, let's see what we can discover on this final episode of Ruth. In chapter 1, we read about how Naomi and Elimelech went to the land of the Moabites because there was a famine. And then we saw how their sons married the local Moabite women, but then how all of the men died, leaving the women alone in chapter 1. And the chapter concluded with Naomi and Ruth going back to Naomi's homeland because Ruth devoted herself to Naomi and to Naomi's God. Now in chapter 2, we read about how Ruth went to the field of Boaz to glean, and Boaz happened to be the kinsman of Elimelech, who was Naomi's father-in-law. And we saw how Boaz ordered that the men stop harassing Ruth in the field, and he provided for her. Now in chapter 3, we read about how Naomi hatched her plan for Ruth to sneak into the field at night and to lay at Boaz's feet so that he could claim her and redeem her as the next of kin. Boaz promised he would do so if the closer next of kin didn't want to, and so we are waiting in suspense to see what happens in this chapter, chapter 4. Now in this chapter, chapter 4, we begin with Boaz sitting by the city gate, which is where in Deuteronomy 25:7 it says that legal matters such as this should be decided. So Boaz is sitting there, and along comes the closest next of kin, it just so happens. And this man is never given a name, he's just referred to as closest next of kin. And this reminds me that stories like this, it's not about the specifics or the facts, but about the moral overall. It doesn't matter what the man's name is, because that's not important to the moral of Ruth's story. And so going on, Boaz instructs this man to sit and to hear his case, and then Boaz also instructs the elders of the city to sit. And now this is important to note that Boaz has an authority here that they all recognize. And so that'll play out later in the story as well, and we'll talk about what that means for the moral too. So Boaz has assembled all of these people, and Boaz lists his case. He says to the next of kin that you are the closest next of kin, and you have the right to redeem both the land of Elimelech and Ruth. And now in verse 5, when Boaz is talking about this, saying that the closest next of kin would also redeem Ruth, the dead man's widow, the next of kin says that he can't really do this right now. He can't redeem the land and a widow, which means that Boaz is now the closest next of kin, and Naomi's plan is coming to fruition. So as we talked about last week, they performed that ceremony. They passed the sandal to show that the land and Ruth, the title to both, is being passed to Boaz, which means that Boaz is now the closest next of kin and can redeem Ruth, the foreigner. So now in verses 11 and 12, the elders bless Ruth, and they say, may she bring as many children as Rachel and Leah, who were the wives of Jacob, the patriarch of the people of God. So now Ruth, who was a foreigner, a Moabite, and a widow, is compared with the matriarchs of the people of God. And then the verses go on, and Ruth and Boaz marry, and then in verses 17 through 22, we read the genealogies of their future lineage, which, wait for it, is the line of David, which also,
wait for it,
is the line of Jesus, according to Luke 1:27. So Ruth, who was a foreigner, a Moabite, and a widow, is now the future mother of the line of Jesus. The book of Ruth, therefore, is the epitome of the Hebrew Bible and ultimately God's countercultural message of radical inclusion. If ancient male-dominated culture was progressive enough to include a foreign woman as the mother of the future great people of God, then should it not be common practice in our churches today to include all marginalized people as full citizens in God's kingdom? If our countries don't look like this, then we aren't working hard enough as the people of God today. We have the power to transform this world together, and we will do so through love.